Hello, everyone. Today we have the second session of the lead generation mentorship program from Bearded Lead Gens. Today we're going to talk about audience gathering and audience segmentation. Right. So let's get down to business. Let's start with a little throwback to our last session where we talked about how audience segmentation is based on your offers and hypotheses. So the segmentation isn't about breaking the audience into pieces, but about actually approaching each segment with its own separate proposition. So audience segmentation occurs on two levels. The first level is the ICP, which is the ideal customer profile at the company level, meaning at the level of the business that needs your service or your product. And the second level is the buyer persona. Buyer persona is a specific decision maker who will either make the decision or assign someone to be responsible for communicating with you. So it's important to define this correctly at each stage. And plus, there are also signals, but signals are more on a technical level, which we'll discuss. So, regarding the ICP, that is the definition at the company level. How can you segment? Well, the first and most basic is, of course, the industry, the niche where your ideal client operates. So that could be tech startups, some CRM systems, e commerce, I don't know, manufacturers of whatever, retail, something else, info business, education. Well, basically the broad niche. The second stage is about geography. Of course, you have to understand that in different countries, you can communicate in different languages. There's a different culture, a different type of communication, and way of starting a dialogue. Therefore, geography is the second crucial factor. So these are the first two aspects that must always be present. They never go away. Then everything depends on what exactly you're selling, what the average check is, what kind of service it is, and so on. Because then you can segment by revenue, that is, by the company's annual income, by company size. So it could be, yes, either a large enterprise or a small startup, or something in between, like an SMB of some kind, and so on. So, by size, in terms of the number of employees, you can also segment the audience. By the way, if you work in markets where no one shows their revenue, well, for example, in the Ukrainian market, it's very difficult to sort the audience by revenue. So, we usually sort the Ukrainian market by the number of employees, by the size of the teams. The American market is easy to sort by revenue. Everyone shows it. In 90% of cases, you see the revenue and can sort by that.
Right, but I'll add a little something about revenue. It's worth considering that the tools that show you revenue don't just take official data, like some reports from open state registries and so on. They also analyze website visits, approximate conversions, that is, well, hypothetical ones. So you have to understand that this is not 100% the revenue that the business submitted to the tax office in some report, but it's an approximate level, and it can fluctuate in a range. If it's, say, $100,000 a year, then it's plus or minus 10,000. And if it's 10 million a year, it could be plus or minus 3 million. So this point is also worth considering.
Yes, as for revenue, it can be an approximation. In markets where reporting is transparent, it's more accurate in terms of what's submitted in open reports. In markets where it's more closed, they tend to analyze websites, traffic, conversions, and so on. So the revenue can be different. And after revenue, more technical stories begin. From the point of view of which products, services, specifically B2B or B2C, what traction, what earning model the company uses, like subscriptions, non subscriptions, and so on. This will be on a technical level and we'll definitely cover that. So next, the next stage, we've defined the profile of the company we're interested in, and we found a list of these companies. We need buyer personas, meaning we need leads who will buy or decide if their company needs our product or service, refer us to the right person who will engage in a dialogue with us, and so on. Why am I saying refer us to the right person for the second time? Because I very often see on the market when a company makes some kind of product, if it's a cheap product, that's one thing. But if it's an expensive product or an expensive service, for example, the HR department, for example, the technology department, the product marketing department, and so on, and they gather SMB level companies. and they go to the HR director, they go to the head of sales, they go to the marketing director first and foremost, because that's supposedly the most targeted approach. And this is a huge mistake that usually leads to lower lead conversion rates because most of these people will tell you they're not interested. They don't want it, they don't need it. They'll look at it in a year, they have no budget, and so on. Any classic sales excuses, just so they don't have to change anything in their own world and don't have to deal with things they consider unnecessary or irrelevant right now because they already have a list of tasks for the next 3 months. So this doesn't apply to enterprise. In enterprise, we really work on a niche basis by department. There are budgets, it's a different story. When we work with startups or SMBs, or well, more or less large companies, but not yet enterprise, meaning around 500 or even up to 1,000 people, in 90% of cases, we have to go to the C level, and mostly to the C level, specifically the CEO, that is the chief executive officer, or the COO, the chief operating officer, or even directly to the founder if we're talking about startups or SMBs. Because there are two options. The first option is that the founders or the CEO make the decision about whether they actually need this service or product right now. And the second option is that the decision in their company is indeed made by the CMO or HRD. But if the CEO brings you to that HRD, you have a much better chance of getting the client. Well, roughly speaking, I can even use our own company as an example. Zhenya and I make the decisions on 90% of all purchases, meaning we decide what we're going to buy, which products or services for our company. And so even if you write to our, let's say, CMO, he'll come to us and say, I got this message. What do you think? Do we need it? But he will write to us because our CMO works on the same level as us and we trust him. In most cases, you'll be rejected, and that's where it will end. That's why I highly recommend starting your contact with the company at the highest level. And only if the highest level doesn't respond to you, then you can start moving down a bit. So, if the company really has a distribution of roles in marketing, HR, and so on decide for themselves how to allocate budgets, then the CEO might just not answer you, and that's okay. After, say, 2 or 3 weeks or a month, 2 or 3 weeks, my favorite phrase, after 2 or 3 weeks or a month, you go to the CMO or to HR and you say, you just make a cold approach. Hi, I'm selling something. Well, roughly speaking, you build a sequence at that level. We'll teach you how to build a sequence in 2 or 3 lessons. So that's a separate story. But in general, at the ICP company level, you determine what you need. At the buyer persona level, in 90% of cases, you go specifically to the highest level of decision makers. That is the CEO, COO, founder, that whole story.
I'll add a little something here regarding roles. I very often see that businesses try to write to heads of sales. Well, I don't understand why, because, well, it's one thing when it's some kind of sales software, like a new CRM or a new IP telephony system or something similar. Yes, then, well, it's logical that a CBDO or head of sales uses it, and you should contact them because they know whether there's a need for it or not. But I very often see that these positions are included in the outreach for some systems, some products or services that have nothing to do with the sales department at all. So be careful when you're creating this ideal client profile at the persona level. Ask yourself if this could be interesting to your lead at all. And the second point, which I unfortunately see in practice, is that the sales department and the HR department, as a rule, don't like to buy anything. So maybe, well, there's a situation where we go to the head of sales, we sell them something, and they say, no, we don't need anything. And then we go to the founder of the same company and they say, yes, we need it. It's an interesting thing. Let's talk. Why does this happen? There are many cases where these people don't like to lobby for decisions for various reasons. It could be an excuse like, everything is working for me. I don't want to implement anything because it's a risk and something might break. Or another objection is purely because people feel that some part of their job will be stolen or devalued by this tool or service. That's why they don't want to lobby for it and don't want to make these decisions. And in most cases, they just say that it's not interesting or not needed. So that's why it's really better to go straight to the founder. And when the founder, for example, says, talk to our head of sales, then you have a very cool intent that they have to react to. We can write and say that I spoke with your founder. He told me to contact you and hold negotiations. or, well, get on a call or something else. And even if that person ignores you, you can go back to the founder and say, listen, unfortunately, they're not responding. I tried writing to them in a few places, so maybe they missed my message. Is there anyone else I can contact? And here, they'll either give you another contact or, well, the CEO will give their subordinate a little push because they're not following their, albeit indirect, instructions.
Yes, but if you first contacted the head of sales and they told you, no, I'm not interested, and then you contacted the CEO and they said, interesting, and then you come to do a demo or a sales meeting and the head of sales is sitting there looking at you and it's written all over their face, I told you I wasn't interested. And you, well, you jumped over my head. That's why it's better to go to the C level first and then to the head of sales. Because even if the C level tells you they're not interested and then you go to the head of sales and it's the other way around, I mean, there are cases where the CEO says, no, we don't need it. And later we approach the head of sales or head of marketing and they say, oh, yes, this is useful for us. And that's it. Our communication then continues with the head of marketing. So the CEO won't be coming back down to this communication, meaning at his level, it wasn't relevant. He said that, we later engaged the head of marketing, and that's it. We went on to sell. If we had done it the other way around, it would be harder to sell because in our meetings, there's already a person who remembers us who said, I don't want it. And you jumped over their head and you still engaged the potential client. And that will make the sales process more difficult for you. Putting a spoke in the wheels, why would you need that? So it's better to move from the top down in startups and in SMBs. When we're talking about enterprise, where the annual budget is distributed among departments, where each department is more or less autonomous, when it's companies like, say, Fortune 500 or just very large businesses, it's usually the other way around. There, we go to preferably still to the C level, but to the C level of the department that's relevant for us. So if we're selling something for marketing, we go to the CMO. If we're selling something for sales, we go to, say, the chief revenue officer or the chief sales officer. Well, different companies have different names for it. I like the chief revenue officer position. Well, it's a person who works in marketing and in sales and across the whole service complex. It's a great specialty. They are good buyers in the enterprise space. As for the highest C level, like the CEO or founders of such companies, we usually only approach them if we have personal contacts. So, roughly speaking, if Yevgen, for example, knows, I don't know, the CEO of Nova Pashta, he can introduce me to him, right? And we can talk. And it will be easier for us to arrange some kind of cooperation with Nova Poshta than if we go to their CMO. So, well, that's just an example, right? Off the top of my head, just for Ukrainian business. Now we're going to move on to the technical part of building an audience. We'll talk about a few tools. We'll start with the basic Sales Navigator. I understand that most of you have worked with Sales Navigator. You know it from A to Z. But I also understand that not everyone has. So I have to start with Sales Navigator. And then we'll move on to Apollo, Clay, collection systems, site scraping, and so on. So that will be the next step today. Right. Okay, now I'll turn on the screen share. So in Sales Navigator, there are two tools, right, for finding leads. The first one is directly leads, and the second one is accounts. Accounts are companies. So here we filter specifically at the company level. That's what we'll actually start with. Let's quickly go over the filters, which ones are useful, which ones, again, I understand that some people work with enterprise. Enterprise is Fortune 500 and so on. For most people, this isn't necessary. We're moving on after all, right? This is a course for a general audience. So if any of you work in enterprise, you can ask questions later and we'll answer them. For now, we'll work in a general format. So here's what I was talking about. There's annual revenue, meaning you can filter by annual income, you can filter by company size. You can filter by company growth. This, by the way, is a great filter for recruiting agencies. Right. And if a company has open positions and has been growing over the last year by a certain percentage, it means they are actively, constantly, and consistently hiring. Why not approach them with a proposal for recruiting agency services? Headquarters location, obviously, these are the countries and cities where the company is located. Industry, fields of activity. What we talked about at the beginning, this is the main filter for you that you need to understand. Let's go ahead and put something in here. like software development. So we already have some kind of list, right, of companies, number of followers. This is never a relevant story because everyone knows that on LinkedIn, you need to build up personal profiles, not the company profile. So, how many followers this company has on LinkedIn is not important at all. We never go there. Next, a cool thing, if you, for example, need to find, for example, you're selling, I don't know, QA services, right? Outsourced. You need to find that in the QA department of a company. There's a maximum of one employee. You find the testing department here, set a maximum of one, a minimum of zero, and you get companies that have from 0 to 1 registered QAs on LinkedIn, or for example, marketers, or for example, sales reps, or for example, lead gens. I don't know, anyone. So you can filter by department. Again, if you need growth, then it's headcount growth. Fortune is a classic story. It's Fortune 50, 500, 100, and so on. By the way, as you can see, software development, unfortunately, this is, a sad insert into our meeting today because I understand that most of our viewers are in software development. Unfortunately, there are almost no Fortune 500 companies in software development. So it's difficult. Next, of course, job opportunities, open positions. But LinkedIn itself only gives you the opportunity to see that in principle, these positions exist on LinkedIn. So for vacancies, if you're filtering by open positions, by an open search for your potential clients, there are other tools, and we'll talk about them today. It's here if you just, in principle, need the company to be hiring. I don't know, maybe you're selling, for example, some kind of HR or recruiting tool that is for hiring automation. Then you don't care who they're hiring. They're hiring. Great, let's go. If not, it's better to use other tools. Activities, again, is a cool thing, but the downside here, for example, is that investments are for the last 12 months. And many companies that received investments have, of course, already allocated them all. And 12 months is a very long period. So there are other tools where it's better to look for investments. And the second one is a change in senior leadership. But again, senior leadership changes is not just C level. It's also mids and heads and so on. So it depends on what you're selling. This is a great filter. You can see in which companies from when you filtered by industry, by geolocation, by revenue or headcount. Well, that is, you've already got an ideal list. You can filter by those from these companies who are in your first degree connections. And this doesn't mean that you'll write to them specifically. Well, like you have, I don't know, a senior software developer in your contacts. You need to sell to the CEO, but you came through the developer. No. But when you reach out to the CEO of this company and he sees that you have a mutual connection with one of his employees, it simply increases the conversion rate for an accepted connection request because somewhere in their head, a connection is made that maybe you know each other somehow through someone. So they are more likely to add you to your contacts. So this is a great trigger for who to add to your outreach first, not just them, meaning you can turn it on. For example, I'll turn it on now. I get 283 companies that are on the Sales Navigator, contacts from them at the first degree. By the way, I have someone from Amazon, cool, and I can work through them, right? Then I'll turn it off and work through all the others. Well, only when you turn it off, you have to reload. It reloaded. Yes. Well, that's the whole story. This is already workflow. Account lists, you can create account lists and so on. And this is a matter of your convenience when using Sales Navigator. When you filtered the companies here, let's narrow them down a bit. Let's set, for example, the headquarters location. Let's just do California. 45,000 results, and let's take a large head count so we have fewer companies. 179 companies. Okay, next we can click select all here, and we see that only 25 results were selected. This is where the downside of Sales Navigator begins. When you work, if you need these filters, you can get around this and click through them manually. So you need to create a list and add all the companies you have to this list, 25 at a time. So for example, I'm creating a list now. Let's use the test list. There, I added it. So once you gathered the companies, then when we go to leads, we can set up a search here. We'll select test here, and now we'll get employees only from these companies. So at the company level, we sorted by ICP. And then we move to the buyer persona level, to the leads, to start filtering decision makers. But we now have only the companies that we sorted in the first step. And from here, we move on to the lead filters themselves. If your search is fairly broad and your criteria for the leads company are also broad, like say industry, and that's enough, then you can start directly with leads. Because at the lead level, you can search by industry, you can search by headquarters, all of that is there. But there's no revenue. There's no information on open positions, no department growth, no leadership changes, investments, and so on. So there are more filters here for the lead, but there are a few for the company. So you need to analyze this depending on your ICP. Do you need the account level or do you go straight to the lead level? For example, we usually go straight to the lead level because many of the filters from the first step aren't important to us. We have other triggers. So we move on here. But, well, for example, we've selected it, right? And here we see that, again, it pulled in the company headcount, it pulled in the headquarters we set, it pulled in the account list we set, and it pulled in the industry. Next, we can set everything about the lead. That is, we can set their function in the company. Usually, the CEO is in business development, for example. So we can set business development. Next, we can either enter specific positions or move on to the seniority level. And here we can select owner, partner, and CXO, for example, vice president. These are the levels that might be interesting to us. So I added 175 companies, and we got 287 people at the C level of these companies in business development. Next, we review them, and if they are relevant to us, we can start an outreach campaign to them. A senior sales director is relevant for me because they buy services like the ones we sell. They might not be relevant for you, so you need to go to functions here and exclude fails. Or you can specify the exact positions to exclude senior sales, partner success, and so on, depending on what you're selling. Next, we can set how long they have been working at this company, meaning we can select either long term employees or just the newer ones. The person's geography, the personal industry filter can be turned off because we already have a compiled list of companies. See, once we turned off software development, we got over 1,000 C-level executives from these companies. Why is that? Because a CMO won't list their industry as software development, they'll list it as marketing services, even though the company is in software development. And so here we can specify everything else we need. Whether they've recently changed jobs, meaning they just started, or if they're active on LinkedIn. You can prioritize sorting by people who are active on LinkedIn. You can also prioritize those who are your first degree connections right here, and so on. These are the general halters. Here's an interesting thing in Sales Navigator, how you can hack LinkedIn a bit and get some cool results. Let's just clear everything here. In Ukraine, LinkedIn groups and communities, they aren't very developed, meaning there are many members, but they're dead groups and so on. But in the US, these groups can be more active. People actually join them, at a minimum to boost their activity on LinkedIn, and at a maximum to get something useful. So, if we understand that our target audience is, for example, startup founders, we can join startup founder groups on LinkedIn, specifically from the account where we have Sales Navigator. And then, once we're accepted into this group, we go to Sales Navigator, go to groups, and type here founders, for example. Here I have a group called Founders Exchange, startup founders. And we automatically get access to 210,000 members of this group. Then we filter these members by all the filters we're interested in, like industry, company headcounts, their location, connections, and so on. And we get a clean selection with a possible intent signal to increase the connection request rate. Hey, we're in the same startup founders community. We probably have common interests. Let's connect. And people are like, heck, what community? I don't know, but well, you're saying we have common interests. We're both startup founders. So let's connect. Yeah, sure, why not? And the connection request rate increases. The second story is how to hack LinkedIn a little. You need to identify your competitors who are selling on LinkedIn, meaning find LinkedIn profiles that look like they're used for selling, meaning they're well filled out, really cool, and they have a lot of contacts. Maybe they're putting out some content. Not always, but often. You can start, first of all, with those who are putting out some content. And then what can you do? I'll just remove this now. So what can you do? You can send connection requests to such accounts. Usually, since these accounts are selling something, they readily accept invites. They're active on LinkedIn, so they will accept you. And then you go to connections of, and you type in here whose connections you want to see. And you get access to 4,000 plus of his contacts. And then you sort them by your filters, whoever fits your ICP and buyer persona, and you take them for yourself. Sales Navigator lets you scrape no more than 2,500 contacts from the results at a time. So, no matter what list you filter, to take them for yourself, you need to narrow them down to chunks of 2,500 contacts. So, for example, if we see that Yevon has 4,000, I need to split these contacts at least in half. That is by company size, by contact level, by company headquarters, whatever. It doesn't matter. Well, but I usually segment by company size because that way there's the least chance of losing someone. That is, we go through all the company sizes one by one, and we'll definitely get everyone. So you need to split them into batches of 2,500. If Sales Navigator and its filters are enough for your ICP and buyer persona, great. It's one of the best tools because it has direct access to LinkedIn's data and it provides the fastest, most relevant data. But it's quite limited. Maybe something will change in the future. Well, but it is what it is. If you need more specific filters, more data, more capabilities, then I personally recommend moving on to clay.com. Our SDRs, our lead gens, use Clay for probably 80 to 90% of their tasks. 10 to 20% is Sales Navigator, 80 to 90% is Clay. Other tools are not used as actively, but it happens sometimes. Okay, let's move on to Clay. This is Clay. Well, I think everyone has heard of it. We've been using it for probably, well, almost since its creation, and it's constantly evolving. They have more and more tools, more and more capabilities. So we use it actively. First, we'll go through Clay's classic search systems, and then we'll move on to data scraping. And Clay is also involved in that. What do we have? There's also find people, there's find companies, there's find jobs. Let's start with the basic find companies. There are many of the same filters here as in Sales Navigator, so I won't go through each one. But what does Clay have that Sales Navigator doesn't? What's cool about it? There's an option to exclude by keywords in the description or headlines of companies on LinkedIn. There's an option to specify product and services, and this will be information not only from LinkedIn, but also from their websites. That is, you can specify exactly what products or services your target client should be selling and filter for those who, for example, I don't know, e commerce, fashion, and apparel. Right. Well, that is something very specific, not just e commerce, but a specific type of product. Or not just CRM, but specifically CRM for HR. Well, and so on. So, through products and services, you can specify very precisely what exactly you need. And the second one is AI filters. AI filters allow you to sort by sub industries, that is, to get more specific. For example, you want to, I don't know, look for SaaS, but you want SaaS specifically in blockchain and Web3. And you will get only blockchain Web3 companies. And you can exclude, for example, I don't know, I want blockchain and Web3, but I don't want financial services. Cool. So those who provide some wallets and so on, right? Not just wallets. Next up, revenue streams. This is a great lifesaver for us. Revenue streams is a cool feature because if your query, for example, is that you need companies from the software development field, and software development is damn everyone. It's both outsourcing and it's also many startups that are just starting out. They don't specify a field, but they do specify software development. And through revenue streams, we can specify that we want to get only those who are engaged in, for example, professional services. If we understand that we need products, we select subscriptions or product sales. We could add a few if we need some rentals, right, we select rental and so on. And the system will show companies that are engaged in it. Well, let's just do it like this. So here's Blockchain Center. Most likely they have some servers there or mining. Most of the ones that appeared here are those who rent or lease something in the blockchain, some equipment or some premises and so on. But they position themselves more from a crypto perspective. And I see that for the most part, that's how it is. It's a match. If we also sort by industries at the top, the results will be really great. Literally 61 results. I understand that there are a few of them. This is a very niche area, probably. Well, but nevertheless, they exist. We will now use them as an example to move forward. And so we have sorted the companies we need. We just click continue. Look, everything I'm showing you can be done even with the cheapest subscription. And so far, we haven't spent a single credit. For now, we are working purely within the subscription, the one for $150, the subscription for $350. The more expensive one is only needed if you want to connect Clay automatically through an API, through webhooks with other tools. So leads are found automatically sent to Grinfi, the outreach goes out, and we only join the dialogue after getting a response. If your lead gen team can export via CSV and then upload to the automation system, great. 150 will be more than enough. Next, we've sorted the companies. So, for example, well, let's imagine that we've gone through all the filters and sorted the companies we need. What do we do next? If we sorted them right inside, then we have a very simple tool here. So, and it also doesn't use any credits. We click on it, we check to make sure our company table is here, the one we used, so that it searches by the LinkedIn URL of these companies. All right, we've got all the employees of these companies that Clay found on LinkedIn. And then again, we sort them by the same filters that we used in Sales Navigator. And here, basically, no new filters appear. Here, the filters for leads are simpler than in Navigator. The main thing here is searching for companies. We sort by, well, I don't know. Let's take, for example, job title. Let's set it so we only want owners. We got 33 R's. We click continue it, import to new table. And again, without spending any credits, we get this list. And if we only need to do outreach on LinkedIn, then we can already upload it, build a sequence, launch the outreach, and that's it. It's running. If we additionally need to find their emails or enrich them somehow, then we start spending some credits. On Clay, look for what we want to do and enrich our data. I'll say right away when you see, for example, that we need to find a work email and it's about 3 credits, that's really an approximation because Clay works like a marketplace, like a waterfall. Yes, a waterfall of tools that do something for you. And for example, you connect an email search, there will be 3 or 4 tools, each costing a certain amount of its own credits. But if your email was found by the cheapest one, then the more expensive ones won't spend credits. So somewhere it might spend 1 credit might be spent, somewhere 5 credits might be spent. Clay tries to make this as cheap as possible for you. So this toolkit is pretty cool. If you need something extra besides LinkedIn, like phone numbers for cold calling, I don't know, maybe some information about websites or whatever you need about these leads, you can use Clay's actions. But today is more about searching and building an audience, so we won't focus too much on enrichment. Again, this is an individual case for everyone. Everyone has their own enrichment. Next, if we start right away with find people, well, everything is very simple here. I won't even explain anything. Classic filters, we can gather people. If we need a very broad search in terms of, say, industries, we just set the company attributes for the company's industry and the size where the person works, and we move straight to the leads without even sorting the companies. That's it. You'll get a great result. What's cool for those who work with the open job signal is Find Jobs, which searches for jobs not just on LinkedIn, but on many other job boards. I don't remember the exact list of job boards where Clay works, but there are many boards. We can specify the jobs we're interested in. For example, let's take accountant and exclude the ones that don't fit. For example, we don't want to search for executive in this area. Specify keywords from the job posting, the location where this job is open, the type, whether there is a recruiter in the company or not. That's also a cool feature. You can exclude some specific jobs if you have a list of specific jobs. Companies, again, for example, you can upload companies here that you are specifically interested in, or we can search through all of them. Next, we've sorted these jobs. We have the company name. Let's narrow it down a bit now so it's not 62,000. Let's try, I don't know, are there any jobs in Kyiv right now that the system will pick up? For some reason, it's not searching at all. Well, okay, let's try Ukraine in general. Probably for such a job, Kyiv is too narrow. Yeah, so it found 65 results for Ukraine. So it makes sense that it didn't find anything for Kyiv. We get a list of these jobs. At the beginning, you could also set it to one job per company because there are duplicates here. We don't need duplicates. We see links to the websites of these companies. And again, from these companies, we can use find people at these companies to find leads, but not by the LinkedIn URL, but by the company domain. It searches that way too. So we don't have the company's LinkedIn URL here. We have the job LinkedIn URL here. But we can also find leads by the company domain in the same way we did after find companies. We find the leads and write, hey, I saw you have this open position. Let's talk. Right. So that's basically find jobs. Next, what else can we do? Signals. Signals work on the logic that you upload a list of specific companies you're interested in, preferably with websites. Or you can do it without websites. I'll show you how to search for websites inside. But if you have them with websites or with LinkedIn links, that's great. For example, you can scrape a list of companies from Sales Navigator. By the way, Grinfi also allows this. You can drop in a link to a list of companies and scrape from Sales Navigator. Then you can upload this to Clay and set a signal for when a company hires someone new, or posts a job, or has some promotions, fundraising, mentions in the news, and so on. This is all configured here. This already costs credits, meaning Clay will charge you a certain number of credits for each signal processing. But, well, if a new round of investment is important to you, or a company mentioned in the news, or the opening of a new job vacancy, specifically for a certain list of comp, then this is a very cool feature. It's easy to set up. The main thing is to have either a Clay table or a CSV file with the list of companies that you're interested in. Now I'll show you how from a list of companies, if you only have the names, how from this list to find the domains, right? Roughly speaking. So, well, for example, let's take good firms. And here there's a list of companies, some of which have websites and some of which don't have websites. And we have, let me sort it now by something like Android, just so there are fewer of them. 545. Let's try to sort it. Let's take free. Yeah, so there are as few as possible to make it easier for me. Okay, we've sorted what we need. Next, we have Instant Data Scraper. It's a plugin that looks like a Pokeball, which we click on, and usually it immediately sees all the data on your site. If it doesn't see them, you can mark them manually. Here we check. The company name is what's important to us. There's no company name here, so we click Try Another Table. We check again to make sure there's a company name. This is the most important thing for us in this case. Okay, let's see. A lot of them, yes. I see that it even collects websites for those that have them. That's great. But but I don't see the name. Either I'm tired and blind or it really isn't collecting it. Let's click another table. Nah, you see it's not here. Well, here it means it collects the websites right away. It's a cool feature, but it won't help us with the demonstration. So here it collects the websites. And then these websites can be uploaded to Clay. But now we'll go to a site where there are no web threads. And I'll show you a more complex scenario. For example, let's use Qt. Here, it often doesn't list the websites. Let's take some marketing agencies. Let's take, for example, I don't know, Poland. So there are fewer of them again. Okay, 377 results. Okay, let's click on the plugin. Not all of them have websites here, so the system tries to collect the names. So we have the company names. Okay, what do we need to do that? We have the company names, so this table works for us. To collect the entire list of 377 companies, we need to click the Locate Next button in the plugin and go down here to find the Next button, basically, meaning the button that turns the pages. We click Next here. There, we've shown it the Next button. Now let's go back here. We click Start Crawling, and the system will automatically scroll through the pages until it collects all 377 results. Well, 377 isn't a lie, so we'll just wait for a moment. You can download this CSV file and save it. Next, we take the CSV file to Clay Home Import CSV. We select the CSV file that we just scraped from Clutch or from any other site. So Instant Data Scraper scrapes almost any website. If it doesn't scrape something, there are other tools you can choose from. But, well, really, in most cases, Instant Data Scraper will help you. It parses with a comma, so we click Continue here, New Blank Table. The import will be created now, and after that, in a couple of clicks, we'll find the websites of these companies. And then it's the same process. We find leads through the websites, and everything is great. Here we have the company names. We'll rename this column so that it's easier for us to find. We click on it, insert to the right, add enrich with, and we specify that we need the company domain. Let's see, company name. We need to specify where the company name is located. Check if we want to spend credits or not. I usually always turn this one off. It depends on the size of the audience, because Clearbit searches for free and finds about 80% on its own. Google is only needed as an extra. Let's leave only Clearbit, for example, for now. Click Save, and first we'll run a check on 10 to see how it works. And let's look at the first 10 by their names. Clearbit found for us, well, it's still searching, but it has already found 8 websites out of 10. We can take a look here, expand the group. Where is it? Oh, wait, I missed. So no result found. Well, it didn't find these 3 sites. You can find them through Google or not. It found the others. So we search the entire list, and then again, we click Find People at these companies. And with these domains, we find company employees, which we scraped from any job board, any directory, really from anywhere. Crunchbase is already quite limited in terms of the data it provides. We scrape companies from Crunchbase using Instant Data Scraper. You can get them with websites right away, and usually even with LinkedIn profiles. And then through Clay, we find employees of companies from Crunchbase because Crunchbase offers great filters for investments, for example, in startups, but very poor filters for employees. It's hard to work with, exporting is a problem, and they're very limited. So we start with Crunchbase at the company level, then upload it to Clay, run it through Clay, and get the leads. If you're working with emails, then you'll need to either use credits in Clay or use Apollo, which is also a pretty good tool. Apollo gives us lead emails, but they need to be validated additionally. Apollo has a more or less static database, so it can give irrelevant results that you then need to validate. Well, basically, the only advantage of Apollo is the emails, and everything else I like Claymore. In general, for 30 to 40% of our clients, Sales Navigator completely covers all their needs. For others, Clay works. And only about 5% need Apollo or other tools. By the way, it works great when our clients go to some conferences. They have an application with a database of conference participants. You can download it and then run it through Clay by first name, last name, and company name to find these people on LinkedIn. So if you participate in such conferences, Clay will do a great job processing these leads and finding them. Basically, for the main toolkit at the first level, that's all. Next comes a more advanced story, which is tailored to each client. Let's summarize the toolkit. That's Sales Navigator plus Clay plus Instant Data Scraper plus the sources that you will be scraping. Regarding ICP, the first level is companies, the second is buyer personas. And buyer personas are not always the end user. It's often the decision maker who can either buy or recommend you to the end user. And third, all of this is automated and doesn't take much time. That is, with the right toolkit. We've started with selecting tools for audience gathering, and next comes the automation. You can create a setup that will be specifically for the process of configuring, building, and launching outreach, taking up, I don't know, 3 to 4 hours a month. Everything else will be the SDR process, communicating with leads and so on. And of course, monitoring to make sure everything works. Actually, that's it for the recording. Have a great day, everyone, and see you next time.